Okay, did you hear anything, or did you come home and find them?
No, man, I've been gone. I just came back.
Okay, and was anyone else supposed to be at your house?
No, ma'am.
A wealthy family, a pristine legacy, and a fortune built on decades of power. But all it took was a single night to tear it all apart. What would make a man seemingly at the top of his game murder his own wife and child in cold blood? And why would the people who once adored him now look at him with suspicion and horror? Tonight, we dive deep into the chilling case of Alex Murdaugh, a case that keeps getting stranger with every new twist. Stay with us until the end, you won't believe what we uncover. Imagine a family whose name carried the weight of justice itself. For decades, the Murdaughs stood at the pinnacle of South Carolina's legal system, their influence stretching deep into the fabric of the 14th Judicial Circuit. They weren't just a powerful family, they were the law. But how did they achieve such power? And more importantly, how did they maintain it without question? For over 80 years, the Murdaugh family's grip on the justice system seemed unbreakable. 3 generations of district attorneys, each passing the baton to the next, with an ironclad legacy of control. They controlled the criminal cases that defined the region. Their name was synonymous with authority, their power seemingly untouchable. But how does a family come to hold such sway? And what happens when that power starts to crumble? Could the system that once elevated them also be the one that brings them down? Enter Alex Murdaugh, the heir to this immense family legacy. On the surface, he appeared every bit the polished Southern gentleman, successful, respected, and seemingly above reproach. A respected lawyer, a familiar face at community events, a man whose charm made him the darling of the legal world. But beneath that smooth exterior, what was really lurking? Was Alex simply living off his family's name, or was he too building his own empire, and perhaps his own downfall? Alex wasn't just another man living in the shadow of his family's legacy. He was a lawyer with a sharp mind and a talent for winning cases. He knew how to navigate the courtroom, how to pull the right strings, and how to charm juries into submission. But could someone with so much power also have a darker side? What if Alex wasn't just living the dream? What if he was hiding something far more sinister? A secret that could unravel everything. For years, the Murdaughs were untouchable, their legacy solid, their influence far-reaching. But the foundation of their power, built on decades of trust and unchallenged authority, was fragile. What happens when that power is tested? When the cracks in the empire start to show? The Murdaughs had long been the face of justice, but what if justice itself was about to expose them? Power, wealth, and influence, these are the things that once defined the Murdaughs. But even the strongest foundations can crumble when secrets start to seep through the cracks. For Alex, the carefully constructed world he'd built was beginning to unravel. The whispers started softly at first, rumors of dishonesty, questionable legal practices, and debts piling up in the background. It wasn't just a financial strain, it was the kind of pressure that threatened to expose everything. For years, Alex had managed to keep his reputation intact. He had built his career on trust, on being the dependable, successful lawyer who always had the right answer, the right move. But what happens when trust begins to fracture? What happens when people start questioning the very man they once believed to be beyond reproach? The moment the Murdaugh family's carefully curated image began to crack was the night of the 2019 boating accident. Alex's son, Paul, was behind the wheel of the boat, heavily intoxicated. The accident resulted in the tragic death of Mallory Beach, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. It was a nightmare, an event that should have been a wake-up call for any family, especially one that prided itself on its reputation.
Do you remember what you said in this interview about the boat wreck?
Not specifically.
About specifically the other people involved in the boat wreck? You don't remember specifically?
Yes, but it became even more so when questions arose about the circumstances surrounding it. Why had Paul been allowed to drive the boat in such a reckless state? How did the Murdaughs, known for their influence and wealth, seem to evade the scrutiny that others would have faced? The answers seemed to slip further away with each new revelation. As the investigation into the accident unfolded, more questions emerged. Why was Alex's involvement in the case so tangled? Why did it seem like the family's legal connections were being used to shield them from the consequences? The public began to question everything they had known about the murders. What had once been a tightly knit, respected family now found itself under the microscope, its every move scrutinized. But was this just the beginning of a much deeper story? Or had the murderers truly crossed a line from which they couldn't return?
Ever, under any point in time, believed that those kids that were riding in that boat, or their parents, or their families, I didn't believe that any of the families, the people that were involved in the boat wreck, had anything to do with hurting Maggie and Paul.
Okay.
But I can tell you that at that time, and as I sit here today, that I believe that boat wreck is the reason why Paul and Maggie were killed.
Okay.
And I'm certain, I believe that.
It was random vigilantes, the 5-2 vigilantes, huh?
No, what I believe, Mr. Waters, is I believe that when Paul was charged criminally.
June 7th, 2021, the night that would alter the course of history for the Murdaugh family. It was an ordinary evening in the tranquil low country of South Carolina. The sun had just set, and the stillness of the night settled over the vast Murdaugh estate. Alex Murdaugh, having left his home unexpectedly, was on his way to visit his parents. His wife, Maggie, and their son, Paul, were at the family's hunting lodge nearby, peacefully unaware of the terror that was about to descend.
911, where's your emergency?
This is Alex Murdaugh at 4147 Moselle Road. I need the police to ambulance immediately. My wife and child are just shot badly.
Okay, you said 4147 Moselle Road in Allison?
Sir?
You said 4147 Moselle Road in Allison?
Yes, sir. 4147 Moselle Road.
Stay on the line with me, okay? Yes, sir. Stay on the line with me, okay? Okay.
Colin County Communications.
Carlton, I have an Alex Murdaugh on the line, caller from 4147 Moselle Road. He's advising that his wife and child was shot.
Okay, and sir, give me the address again.
It's 4147 Moselle Road. I've been up to it now. It's bad.
Okay. Okay, and are they breathing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and you said it's your wife and your son?
My wife and my son.
Are they in a vehicle?
No, ma'am. They're on the ground out at my kennel.
Okay, and did you see anyone? Okay, is he breathing at all?
No, nobody.
Is she? Okay, do you see anything? Do you see anyone in the area?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
What color is your house on the outside? What color is your house on the outside?
It's white. You can't see it from the road.
Okay, is it a house or a mobile home?
It's a house.
Okay, and what is your name?
My name is Alex Murdaugh.
Okay, and did you hear anything, or did you come home and find them?
No, ma'am. I've been gone. I just came back.
Okay, and was anyone else supposed to be at your house?
No, ma'am. Please hurry.
We're getting somebody out there to you. Okay, what is her name?
Maggie and Paul.
Maggie is her name?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And please hurry.
We're getting somebody out there to you. Me asking you these questions don't slow them down, okay?
When the police arrived, the scene was nothing short of horrific. Maggie and Paul Murdaugh lay dead, murdered at close range, their bodies found near the family's dog kennels, a place they had often spent time together. It was a shocking, brutal crime that immediately raised more questions than answers. How had this happened? What had led to such a violent end for two members of the Murdaugh family? The location itself, remote and quiet, felt like an eerie echo of the family's once unbreakable reputation. This was no accident. This was cold-blooded murder, and the whispers about what might have truly happened began to grow louder with each passing moment. As investigators pored over the scene, it quickly became clear that this was not a random act of violence. The level of precision and the execution-style nature of the killing suggested that whoever had done this knew exactly what they were doing. But why Maggie and Paul? Why now? Alex Murdaugh's frantic phone call raised even more suspicions. Why was he so far away when his wife and son were attacked? Why had he not been at home with them that night? And why? When the police first arrived, did Alex's behavior seem off? Was he genuinely grieving, or was there something else behind his rushed, almost rehearsed demeanor? As the hours wore on and more details of the crime scene came to light, the questions about Alex Murdaugh's role in the murders only deepened. The Murdaugh family had always been at the center of attention, but now, their name was attached to something far darker, something that not even their wealth and influence could shield them from. The police, initially focused on a possible robbery gone wrong, began to entertain more chilling possibilities. Was Alex Murdaugh truly a grieving father and husband, or was he hiding something far more sinister? Days passed, and the investigation deepened, pulling in more leads, more suspects, and more questions. The Murdaugh family had always seemed untouchable, their name synonymous with power and respect. But in the wake of this tragedy, that facade began to crack, revealing a side of the Murdaughs no one could have imagined. The question that lingered over everything was this: who would want to kill Maggie and Paul Murdaugh? And just as importantly, was Alex Murdaugh involved in their deaths? Or was he yet another victim in a larger, darker scheme? The Murdaughs had been a dynasty, a name that represented the law, justice, and the power that came with it. But now, they were at the heart of a chilling mystery that reached into the darkest corners of their world. The tragedy of June 7th, 2021, would expose the Murdaugh family like never before. Secrets would unravel, trust would be shattered, and the truth hidden beneath layers of deception was about to come to light. The question remained, what was the cost of a family's power, and what lengths would they go to in order to protect it? The crime scene was one of horror, the kind of sight that would haunt anyone who witnessed it. Maggie Murdaugh, her life stolen in a moment of brutal violence, was found near the family's dog kennels. The place where the family's pets had once played, now stained with tragedy. Her body lay lifeless, a victim of a calculated attack. And just yards away, her son Paul was found, murdered in cold blood. The scene itself was enough to chill anyone to their core. But it wasn't just the brutality of the killings that stood out, it was the unsettling questions that immediately followed. What made this crime so deeply disturbing was not just the savage manner in which it was carried out, but the bizarre details surrounding the scene. The positioning of the bodies suggested that this was no random act of violence. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong or an accidental tragedy. No, this was a targeted attack, a deliberate strike that felt almost too precise. The killer, or killers, knew exactly what they were doing. And yet, as investigators combed through the evidence, the more they uncovered, the more they began to feel that something wasn't quite right. Alex's initial story, filled with panic and emotion, seemed to slip through their fingers like water. He claimed to have found his wife and son in this very spot, murdered while he was away at his parents' house. But why was his timeline so inconsistent? Why did the details he provided seem to shift each time he spoke? Was this the reaction of a grieving father and husband, or was there something more insidious lurking beneath the surface? The detectives couldn't ignore the mounting doubts. Alex had placed the bodies at the crime scene, but his story was full of gaps. Why hadn't he heard anything? No sounds of gunfire or screams from his wife or son? And why, when police arrived, did Alex seem oddly composed, as if he were trying to control the narrative rather than letting the events unfold naturally? His calmness felt out of place amidst the chaos of the moment. Was this the behavior of someone who had just discovered the brutal murders of his closest loved ones? At first, it seemed like Alex was the innocent man who had stumbled upon a terrible scene. But as the investigation deepened, a different picture began to emerge. The police were no longer just piecing together the sequence of events, they were now questioning Alex's role in what had happened. His inconsistency in the retelling of the events, the oddness of his behavior. and the mounting doubts about his alibi all pointed to a man who may have been hiding something. The scene itself, with its chilling quietness, began to paint a picture of a family torn apart by violence, but also of a man who may have been more involved than he was letting on. How could a man who had spent his life manipulating the law now be the one under its harsher scrutiny? And why, with all of his resources, had Alex failed to provide a coherent explanation for his whereabouts that night? Each new piece of evidence seemed to only deepen the mystery. And as the days passed, the weight of the family's past, their legacy of power, influence, and secrecy began to hover over everything. Was the Murdaugh family's long-standing grip on justice now turning against them? Was this a story of a tragic murder, or was it part of a much larger, more complex narrative, one where Alex was no longer the victim, but possibly the perpetrator? As the days turned into weeks, the investigation into Maggie and Paul's murders only deepened. The more investigators dug into Alex's life and the family's history, the more they uncovered. The blood at the crime scene wasn't the only thing that was about to spill. The family's carefully crafted image was crumbling, and every answer seemed to lead to more questions. The Murdaughs may have once ruled this corner of South Carolina, but now their darkest secrets were clawing their way to the surface. And Alex Murdaugh, once the protector of his family's legacy, found himself standing on the precipice of a truth he could no longer hide.
Just to try to get through this quicker, I admit.
I know you want to get through it quicker, but we're not. So answer the question.
What I admit is that I misled them, I did wrong, and that I stole their money. You have charged me with murdering my wife and my son, and I've sat here for all these weeks listening to all this financial stuff that I did wrong, that I'm embarrassed by. I'm happy to talk to you about as much of that as you want to talk about. I'm required to talk about it as much as you want to talk about it. But the fact is I cannot specifically remember sitting down. The details that you're asking me for, I can't tell you. But what I can tell you is that in all these financial situations, I stole money that was not my money. I misled people that I shouldn't have misled, and I did wrong.
The point that I'm asking you is, it's not just as simple as some paperwork. You had to sit down and deal with these people and convince them that you were telling them the truth in order to steal this money.
As the investigation continued, the question on everyone's mind grew clearer. Had Alex been driven to murder to silence the growing threat of his financial ruin? Or was his role in the killings just the tip of a much larger iceberg? The more they uncovered, the more it seemed that the Murdaugh family's facade was built on a series of lies, deception, and manipulation. But there was something even darker lurking beneath the surface, something that, as the investigation continued to unfold, threatened to expose not just Alex, but the entire Murdaugh empire. With each layer peeled back, the investigation began to reveal the truth behind Alex Murdaugh's seemingly perfect life. He had spent years manipulating the law and the people around him, weaving a web of lies to maintain his wealth and power. But now, the walls were closing in. The financial misdeeds, the inconsistencies in his alibi, and the growing doubts about his involvement in the murders all pointed to one thing: Alex Murdaugh was no longer just a suspect in a tragic crime. He was the key to unraveling a much larger and more terrifying story. Detectives now knew that Alex Murdaugh wasn't just hiding his own sins, he was protecting something much bigger. The investigation into the murders had turned into an investigation into the entire Murdaugh family's legacy, and the dark underbelly of their power was now exposed for all to see. The deeper they dug, the more they realized that the truth behind Maggie and Paul's murders might be even more shocking than anyone had ever imagined. And Alex Murdaugh, the man who had once been the pillar of his community, was now facing the very same justice he had spent a lifetime bending to his will.
I've been able to answer some of your questions. I know you probably have more, but with my questionings, trying to get some things cleared up, have I given you some answers?
Well, I mean, I do know more than I did, for sure. So, yes, I mean, some of those questions have certainly, yes, sir.
What other questions do you have that?
I would like to know exactly what happened.
Me too. The best that I've been able to put together.
Tell me, it looks like. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I believe Paul was shot first. For the simple fact of where he was located.
How many times was he shot?
Twice.
I thought he shot Maggie first because they could tell he shot her in the back of the head.
What? You said he thought they shot Maggie first, or Maggie was shot first?
He thought, Alex said that he thought Maggie was shot first because she had been shot in the back of the head.
By September 16th, 2021, the walls finally closed in on Alex Murdaugh. After months of investigation, multiple lies, and an unfolding tale of deceit, he was arrested. The charges were staggering embezzlement, fraud, staging his own shooting, and, most shocking of all, the brutal murders of his wife, Maggie, and their son, Paul. The man who had once been a powerful figure in South Carolina's legal system now found himself facing a world that saw him as something else entirely, a man accused of unspeakable crimes. But what led Alex to this point? How did the man who once seemed untouchable end up behind bars, with the entire nation watching? As Alex took his seat in the defendant's chair, the courtroom fell silent. The faces of the prosecution were stern, resolute in their pursuit of justice. They had spent months compiling evidence, unraveling Alex's web of lies, and they now had a case built on solid ground. On the other side, the defense team sat, their expressions guarded, knowing the odds were stacked against them. Was there any way they could save their client, or had Alex's past actions already sealed his fate? As the trial neared its conclusion, the eyes of the nation turned toward the Murdaugh family. What had started as a local scandal had now become a gripping, high-profile case that gripped the country. The prosecution's case was sharp and compelling, each piece of evidence linking Alex Murdaugh to not just the brutal murders of his wife and son, but also to a string of financial crimes that had spanned years. His web of deceit had grown so intricate, so far-reaching, that it seemed impossible for anyone to avoid the crushing weight of the truth.
All right, Mr. Murdaugh, I sentence you to the State Department of Corrections on each of the murder indictments in the murder of your wife, Maggie Murdaugh. I sentence you for a term of the rest of your natural life for the murder of Paul Murdaugh, whom you probably loved so much. I sentence you to prison for murdering him for the rest of your natural life. Those sentences will run consecutive.
March 2023, Alex Murdaugh was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without any possibility of parole. The Murdaugh story will echo through criminal history for years to come. But how many other families, communities, or individuals might be hiding dark secrets behind their wealth and power? What lengths will people go to in order to protect their empire? This isn't just about one family, it's a reminder that no one, no matter how powerful, can escape the consequences of their actions forever. It's a wake-up call for all of us to stay vigilant, to question the systems of power that protect the corrupt, and to always seek out the truth, no matter how deeply it's buried. Justice may take time, but it is relentless. Stay informed, stay curious, and remember, the truth always finds a way to surface. But what do you think? Is there more to the Murdaugh story that we haven't uncovered yet? Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more stories that reveal the truth behind the headlines. Share this story, and together, let's continue the fight for justice. No one is above the law.